Running and lifting, weirdly, has so many misconceptions and so many beliefs around it that hold so many people back, especially when it comes to pushing size, pushing strength, and pushing speed and endurance, that you can't do them all at once. You can. You just have to be a lot smarter with it. And the funny thing is about this is that, like, so many folk follow people, consume people's content, look up to people, like influential figures, athletes, hybrid athletes, loads of different people that are literally defying their belief, yet they still believe that if they do it, it's going to happen to them. And this was me for a very long period of time. And ultimately, why was I always tired? Why was I losing size? Why was I unable to balance both? It's because I just wasn't training that smart. I wasn't eating that smart. And I was trying to drive everything just by volume, 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 volume. So the typical journey for someone that does not have an athletic background in running or lifting, and they've got into it maybe in their 20s or 30s or 40s, is they've maybe lifted first or they've maybe ran first. Typically, they've lifted first, and then they've seen their mate go to like a park run or compete in a 10K, a half marathon, a marathon, and they're immediately like, well, I want a piece of that. And what do they start doing? They start going out and just testing their 5K, their 10K all the time. And then they think to get faster, they just keep doing that without making any changes whatsoever to their nutrition, their training protocol, their recovery. They just slot in more running on top of it. And then what happens is it's just short-lived. And they end up getting skinny, their energy starts going through the floor, the performance in the gym goes through the floor, so they actually lose their physique. And then they build up this belief that you cannot do both. It's not that you cannot do both. You've just went about it the total wrong way. So I want to go over like the ins and outs, the finer details and beliefs that I've completely shattered, things that I personally embody, and stuff that we actually coach inside Ready for Anything when it comes to getting faster, building endurance, building the physique, and building strength, because you can do all at once. You just have to be a lot smarter. So the first thing we need to be doing when it comes to nutrition is we need to ditch this rigid, fixed mindset when it comes to macros and calories and everything being exact. The thing you need to imagine is as you're building fitness, obviously fitness is relative to strength as well, but when we're pushing volume, kilometers, mileage, we're getting fitter, faster, what happens is that your output begins to go up. But the way you need to look at your body's like a furnace. And the fitter you get, the harder your body works. So it's almost like those like big locomotive trains, you know, the ones with the coal engine on it you've seen in like old movies and cartoons, and they chuck the coal into it and the fire burns hotter, then the engine works harder. It's the exact same when it comes to your fitness. So there's obviously going to be days where your output is a lot more higher and days where it's a lot lower. So if I do a 45-minute weight session one day and 8,000 steps, what I output in that day versus the day that I'm literally smashing a 90-minute run and maybe doing a weight session in the morning and I do literally like 20,000 steps is obviously going to be totally different. So being fluid is knowing that there's going to be higher days and lower days, but also listening to your body and being very, very intuitive. There is no day that I hit the exact same macros every single day, because my output the day before, my intensity in a session, just because I felt really good, might have been that 5% higher than what it was the day before. Therefore, I need to account for that 5% somewhere else. And I really go off of how I feel. So you have to earn the right to be intuitive, but when it comes to doing a high volume of training, if you're doing 50, 60, 70, 80 kilometers of running per week, lifting weights 3 to 4 times a week, and maybe even doing some bike work on top of that, that's a high output. So actually being very rigid and fixed on this is exactly where my food needs to be isn't going to serve you long term. You need to start moving away from this very, very rigid mentality and be a lot more fluid when it comes to your approach with nutrition. The next part is what I call the callusing phase. So obviously calluses are what you get in your hand from when you lift, right? When you start out and you enter like a new level of fitness and you're pushing new heights, you're getting faster, you're hitting distances consistently every single week that you've never ran before, you're hitting PBs on distance, you're running 20K regularly, 25K, maybe even do a 30K training run lead up to a marathon. What begins to happen the first time you do this or the second time you do it is the body's just not used to it. And the more you do this, the more you callous not only your body, but you callous your mind to it and you become a lot more accustomed to it. So the reason why I'm saying this is I look back to my early stages of running and I probably wasn't equipped or conditioned to do it, but I always felt like after, during, the wheels were falling off, and it's just because my body was not conditioned. So depending on what your background is, maybe if you have a sporting background, that's great. That's going to put you in a really, really advantageous position. But if you've maybe not got a sporting background and running is completely new to it, be patient and understand at the beginning, you're going to make mistakes. You're probably going to be a lot more tired than what is further down the line. I was actually having a thought about this recently. Like before we left Bali, the last time we were there, we were in the peak of training for High Rocks. I was pushing life, pushing business, really, really doing a high training load, like 12 to 14 hours a week. And I felt great. And I think back to where I was prior to World Champs in June 2024. And I honestly felt like the walls were crumbling down because I was so fatigued from training. Now, that training block was a lot bigger. I had a bit of a deload, obviously, prior to that as well. But the point I'm trying to get at here is that, like, if I just think about how conditioned my body has become to train really, really hard, doing robust things, consistent high volumes of running, I'm just used to it. It's just what happens over time. So you might be feeling quite tired right now. Obviously, you need to address nutrition, recovery, sleep. But at the same time, the more you do this stuff, the more you actually callus your body and mind, and you actually get a lot more used to it. This is what's known as conditioning. To complement the last two parts I've spoken about, you need to remember that mistakes are essential and failure is an essential part of growing. Like, even though I am telling you all these things right now, it's actually really important for you to go away and live and learn a lesson and actually feel what that feels like. Because it might just so happen that I've told you some things today and you're like, God, this is great information. Thank you so much. And you don't make that mistake. Or you might be in the other end of the spectrum where I've literally told you not to do to avoid insert problem, but you still go and do it anyway. But then when you're faced with that injury, that obvious mistake that we've spoken about, it then lands in a different way because you go, oh, that's that thing Christian said, and this is what it feels like. If I go back to my first ever Ironman, I had to feel what it felt like to bonk several times to understand the value of regulating my carb intake. I thought I could just get away with eating less carbs. I'm not defying science, but what ended up happening is it had to come back and bite me in the arse. And there was a particular day that I always remember and still talk about where Ailey had to come and pick me up in the car. So I'd been out on my bike for 6 hours. I just hadn't properly fueled. I just had not ate enough food for what was required. I'd probably ate literally like 120 grams of carbs over like 6 hours. You're meant to eat like 60 to 100 grams per hour. Like, I do not know how I even got that far on the bike. Anyway, she had to come pick me up and I felt like I'd taken like a dodgy Ecki or something. It was awful. So yeah, like sometimes you need to live a lesson and it's an essential part of growing. So I know I'm telling you all these things to avoid and not do, but sometimes you need to go through it and it needs to happen to you. And obviously the most important part, we ought to be thinking, how do we maintain the rig? Now, there's a big shift happening now. More and more people are getting into hybrid style training. But the one thing I see so much with clients, and I've been there myself, is that we get very precious, which is actually about junk volume. So if you've went from lifting weights 5 days a week, 6 days a week, you're now taking this new approach to training that's lifting weights 2 to 3 times a week. You can feel a bit like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my physique. Oh my God, I'm going to lose all my shape. You're not going to lose all your shape. The reality is you've probably not been training hard enough. Now, this is a spectrum, guys, right? If I'm talking to someone that's like an elite bodybuilder that's literally got, that's like 240 pounds of pure muscle, then yes, they obviously are. But I'm talking about Joe Blogs here that's in pretty good shape. It's got a bit of shape about them, maybe a good shape around their glutes, their quads, their shoulders, their lats, male or female, whatever that is. You're not going to lose your physique. The thing that you just need to focus on is session quality. Now, when you're training like this, it's not going to be hard day all the time. It's going to be like hard, easy. And when you're going to get a lot of your volume and building your base is actually going to be during your easy sessions. So the full point of easy sessions is to train when you're under a level of fatigue and then have days that are going to be harder and more intense. These are essentially higher neurological stimulus days. That's when you're lifting your weights, you're doing your harder sessions, you're doing your hill sprints, you're doing your tempo runs, you're doing your threshold runs, whatever that is. And you would basically want to do these in a way so that it's essentially a hard day followed by an easier day. This is the best way to manage recovery. But not only that, it means that when you go into these hard sessions, your output's going to be on point. In my opinion, I think too many people just do too many hard days back to back without even realizing it. And then they maybe start off and the Monday, the split starts on a Monday. And by Friday, they're literally like half a version of themselves. The session on a Friday compared to the session on a Monday is like totally different. That's because their attention to detail when it comes to their nutrition goes out the window. They're more fatigued from work. They're more driven and focused on a Monday versus what they were on a Friday. And it's just a mentality thing. And for a lot of people, they're just not optimizing their strength training. So really focus on quality instead of quantity, because so many folks just focus on volume. And folk are just doing a lot of junk volume, to be honest. And this has been an absolute game changer for me. You need to focus on RPE, rate of perceived exertion, because it's going to get to a point, depending on where you're at in your fitness journey, what you're doing, the volume of running you're doing, where your strength is not going to progress. And by the way, if you're averaging 80 to 100 kilometers per week consistently, you're running fast, your running is really impressive. If your weights are even staying the same, that's actually a massive bonus. To even maintain strength is great at this point, but you need to let your ego go at this point and understand that there is times to push and there is times to pull. Too many people try and maintain when they don't need to be maintaining. There is only literally going forward or going backwards, but there is certain times where if you are literally pushing endurance more than you ever have, something has to give somewhere else, and it's definitely going to give in your big legs. You're going to see this a lot more in your squats as well. Like recently when I was literally, before I got my injury, I was literally averaging about 95 to 100 kilometers per week, and my squat just stayed the exact same. I felt like I was fighting for my life in it, but ultimately that's just the way it is. So instead of focusing on strength, I was just focusing on RPE. Am I hitting the same RPE or more than what I did last week? Because if that's the case, you're going to be progressively overloading. And then lastly, this has been a game changer for me and a game changer for our clients. I've actually, I'll put it in the links below. I've created a video which basically describes paces so well. All of your paces are relative to where you're at. So your zone 2 can pretty much determine where your 10K is going to be, your 5K is going to be, your half marathon is going to be. As I said already, I've attached this in the video below if you want to go and watch it. And essentially, when you run, a lot of people now are chasing these sort of arbitrary figures. I want to go sub 25K. If you are running a 6-minute kilometer for your easy pace run, you're not fit enough to run a sub 25K. It's just as simple as that. Your easy pace, so this is like basically 180 minus your age, that's your zone 2. So I am 31, so my top end of my zone 2 is 149 beats per minute. That's the best way to work out your zone 2, by the way. Your zone 2 pace is essentially, for me, it's about 140 beats per minute to 149 beats per minute. Whatever that is, for what you can run for like an hour, your 5K will be 60 to 90 seconds faster per km. So if I'm running 450 or a 5-minute kilometer from my easy pace and my heart rate's 140, that's going to mean my 5K pace is anywhere between 330 to 4-minute kilometers, depending on where I'm at. So that's the way that you work out. And the reason why I'm telling you this is that like you need to focus on everything across the board. And if you want to get faster, you need to really focus on building the base. You need to really focus on building the zone 2. And I know it seems boring. I know that it seems monotonous. And I know that it seems slow, but it will get faster. The only reason it's not getting faster because you're not being consistent with it. So I know it might be like, oh my God, I feel like this is a snail's pace. I feel like I could run faster right now. The only way that you're going to build your base over time is by focusing on making a predominant part of your training zone 2 base focused work. So yeah, guys, I hope you took a lot away from this today. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe. It literally takes you 2 seconds to do it, and I ask you for nothing else. And as I said already, I have linked that video below so that you can actually watch it and understand your paces a little bit better. It breaks down exactly where you should be at, what you should be focusing on, what your 10K will be, your 5K will be, and your 21K will be, based on what your zone 2 is. So it's really important to know your numbers. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. See you later. Goodbye.